Welcome to my channel, detailing events throughout the decades. 2009. Air France Flight 447. It was on the evening of Sunday, May 30th, when Air France Flight 447 took off from Rio de Janeiro Airport, and made its way down the Brazilian coastline, before heading out over the Atlantic Ocean. The flight was heading to Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. Air France Flight 447 was an Airbus A330. On board there were 228 passengers and crew. The pilot was 58-year-old Marc Dubois, who had joined Air France in 1988. Also in the cockpit was 37-year-old David Robert and 32-year-old Pierre-Cédric Bonin. When the flight had originally taken off, everything was normal, even though they were heading towards a band of thunderstorms that had brewed in the mid-Atlantic. This was not unusual, and the highly trained Air France pilots and crew were used to flying through this type of turbulence. 4 hours into the flight, Air France sent an automatic signal, indicating that there had been an electrical circuit malfunction. The autopilot was disconnected, either from the malfunction or manually by the pilot, who may have been trying to gain control of the aircraft. There were several attempts to contact Air France Flight 447, but no further messages from the flight were received. It was now feared that something had happened to Flight 447. The aircraft had plunged into the ocean, killing all 228 passengers and crew on board. On June 2, Brazilian Air Force spotted the wreckage, along with signs that they thought could be jet fuel. It was announced later in the day that the Air Force believed this to be the wreckage of Flight 447. A Brazilian Navy ship reached the crash site soon after the wreckage had been spotted, along with 2 French Navy vessels, equipped with 2 mini-submarines. It now became clear to the rescuers that it was going to be a search for wreckage and dead bodies only, with no survivors. On June 5, the search for the missing flight recorders had begun, but by mid-July, the flight recorders had still not been recovered, despite ongoing searches. On May 24, 2010, the search for the flight recorders was called off. Some wreckage and bodies still remained in 2011, at depths of 3,980 meters. It was believed that they were still trapped in the remains of the fuselage. The search resumed on April 3, 2011, to recover other parts of the wreckage. However, the flight recorders were eventually found in the wreckage. The flight recorders were transported to the BEA's office near Paris for data download and analysis. By May 15, all the data from the flight recorder and cockpit voice recorder had been downloaded. It was between May 5 and June 3, 2011 that 104 bodies were recovered from the wreckage. The total number of bodies which had been recovered so far was 154. Eventually the search would end, and the rest of the bodies were left unrecovered. On May 16, BEA investigators ruled out an aircraft malfunction as a cause of the crash. The BEA stated that no conclusions had yet been made, and investigations were still ongoing. However, it was found that in the minutes before the crash, the aircraft's onboard systems had sent a number of messages indicating a disagreement in the indicated airspeed readings. The airspeed of the aircraft was unclear to the pilots at the time. It was discovered that between 2008 and 2009, there had been 9 other incidents involving the temporary loss of airspeed in Air France's Airbus A330 and A340 fleet. On May 27, 2011, the BEA released an update about its investigation into Flight 447. It concluded that from post-mortem examinations of the bodies and wreckage recovered, that the aircraft had not broken up in the air, but had fallen into the ocean still intact. The flight recorders revealed that the aircraft's descent into the ocean was not due to mechanical failure, but because the flight crew had raised the aircraft's nose. This reduced its speed until it entered an aerodynamic stall. The reason the pilots lost control of the aircraft still remains a mystery. In the final report on July 5, 2012, the BEA concluded that the crew had failed to follow appropriate procedure for loss of display airspeed information. They concluded that the crew failed to realize the aircraft had stalled, and did not make any inputs that would have made it possible to recover the aircraft from the stall. It was also found that not long after the crash of Flight 447, Air France Flight 445 had also made a Mayday call, because of severe turbulence around the same area as where Flight 447 had crashed. However, this time, the crew managed to land the aircraft at Paris. Both Air France and Airbus were investigated for manslaughter in 2011, but in 2019, prosecutors recommended dropping the case against Airbus, and charging Air France only with manslaughter and negligence. It was stated that the airline was well aware of the technical problems with key airspeed instruments, but failed to train its pilots how to resolve them. However, French magistrates decided that both Air France and Airbus were not liable, as they could not ascribe fault to the companies in what appeared to be a case of pilot error. The victims' families called the decision an insult to the memory of the victims, and said they would be appealing the decision. Two monuments on opposite sides of the Atlantic memorialize those who were lost. One monument is located in the Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, while the other is outside Rio de Janeiro. Both honor those passengers and crew who were killed in the fateful crash. We forever remember those who were killed on board Air France Flight 447. May you never be forgotten. Thank you for watching and learning about these events in history. Please subscribe to my channel, to view other events throughout the decades.